All right, everybody. Welcome back to another courageous conversation with Sin and Sam. Today, we have had about an hour together, just really getting through my personal limitations, my self-doubt. So I want to talk about that today. Sin, you are always an incredible encourager, but also that person who can see straight through when someone is holding back. And that's what I love about you. And that's what I encourage in you quite often. And I would love for you to just talk about what it's meant for you to focus on your personal development because it's helping you see the goodness, greatness, and the opportunity for others.
It is so big, Sam. Good morning. Good morning. And thank you for having me. I always enjoy our conversations. You, my darling, are a light. And I know that we've had this conversation for the last 30, 40 minutes. But the question is, or the answer is, it's you. And I know I talk about this all of the time. Some people don't see it in themselves. So when I cross somebody's path, and I can, one of my gifts, and I'm leaning into this, is that I'm very intuitive, and I could read a person by their body language, by their expression, right? Because every person, and I'm just realizing this actually as we're having this conversation, the biggest thing for me is one of my very first bosses. She always said, "You're never fully dressed without a smile." Actually, I think that's in the movie Annie too, isn't it? So funny. But I think the smile is so important. It totally changes your demeanor, your expression, your countenance. Even if you don't want to wear it, put it on. Even if you don't want to, because it will truly help you change your physical, your emotional, right? So when you just asked me that, when it's self-development, I think it's really being self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
It's huge. Even coming off the 360 with Brandon and the Cardone Ventures team, they always talk about you. It's me leadership, or we leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts with you and being self-aware. So the growth for me, all of these different avenues that I've taken, the books that I've read, the conferences I've gone to, the communities that I'm a part of, all of those things help me to, and even our conversations, courageous conversations with you, it is just the avenue. It's a practice also. The more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Mm-hmm.
People have ready consistency. They lack consistency. We'll do it for a little bit, or because it sounds good, or because somebody told us to do it. But then it's up to us to keep the river flowing, to keep the motion going. Because if we're not in motion and we're not taking those steps, what happens? We fall off. We say, "Oh, I didn't do it today. That's okay. I'll do it tomorrow." You know what I mean? And we have to build that muscle to just consistently work at it. You gave me a compliment earlier that you said I'm very authentic, and it just comes.
Mm-hmm.
And I also realized recently that it doesn't matter what conversation I'm in, no matter who I'm talking to, whether it's my own children, whether it's the woman that does my hair, whether it's people in the 10X community, the GSD community, there is something in me that always looks to the inner self. When you say, I can read somebody, I can look at them and know if they've had a good day or they need a little something from me. I never take it as a transactional interaction. I'm always looking to leave the person better than I found them. And that's really important, because I think that we talked about this just a little bit also, is that the world is so negative. It will constantly throw things in our path that will make us think that we're not doing the right thing, or we have to do this. When if we concentrate on what's on the inside and we concentrate on always consistently growing ourselves, it gives us that much, that many more tools to help when those things come at us, because the consistency of keep doing it will build our muscles so that when we get those things, we'll sit on it for a second, which we should, just to reflect on it, but then keeps us going to get back in it.
Yeah. And more so beyond just the one foot in front of the other, as so many of us in adult life are conditioned to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's pulling that linchpin within ourselves to bring about the awareness that, okay, we can do the good work, we can have consistency in our lives, but what are we doing to ensure that we're internalizing these reflections and reframing them as we step into these new circumstances, right? The path that each of us are on is that we're always stretching and growing, but there are these moments, these natural limiting beliefs, things that we've grown up with, or that we do with consistency that don't serve us. But when you get around, perhaps your hometown or people that you grew up with, you can find yourself back in these patterns. This is something I've noticed over the years as each one of us continues to stretch and grow, and especially living in New York, like you have these patterns where you're stretching and growing all the time, but you will hit, and you reframed this, right? Not challenges, but opportunities. And this is one of the reframes that I leverage definitely for myself to, come from rock bottom time and time again over the last 2 years in so many facets of living, and keeping that one foot in front of the other and trying to, shift my generational challenges for my family and my upbringing. And one of the things I've noticed is that challenges are your greatest gift to others. When you step through them, when
Mm-hmm.
you win, every single time that you beat those challenges, that's a reframe and a tool in your toolbox that you can gift into others. And one of the things that I've noticed is the more that we share these, the less negative weight that they hold on us, and the
Mm-hmm.
more opportunity they give us to pour into others.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd love to hear your kind of feedback and reframe on replenishing our own cups on a regular basis, as you and I are both empathic individuals who pour into others on a
Mm-hmm.
regular basis, as as unconsciously as we breathe, right? We pour into others first. What
Yes.
is it like for you, and what has it been like for you to replenish yourself and ensure that you're honoring each of those opportunities that you've been gifted with?
Well, I talk about you a lot. In the GSD community, Sunday is the 4 R's: relax, replenish, rejuvenate, and refocus. But I have also added a fifth R, which is reflect. Because if we're not doing the self-work, that's how we fill up our cup. That's for me. That's what I do. Because I look at the week, what things I did well, what things I can improve on, what areas can I grow in. But part of that comes with, when I say replenish, it's going to see my grandma because she loves me unconditionally, being part of the community with GSD and having one-on-one phone call conversations. It's really learning what fills your cup. If you just keep going day to day to day, like yesterday, I got my nails done. I got a massage.
Mm.
For the very first time, I did the hydration through the IV, which was awesome. It's for the last 2 weeks, we touched on this. For the last 2 weeks, it's just been go, 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 go. The book dropped, 10X 360 in Washington. I got home last night at 12:30, and it's only 8:30 my time right now. But we talked about that. It's just knowing yourself.
Yeah.
I am a huge advocate of me time, because when you have all of that and you're giving to other people, it can, I don't want to say wear on you, but it can, it just takes a lot from you. And like you said, how do you replenish your cup? Those are the things that I do. I have to focus on my well-being often,
Yep.
And part of that also is just having quality time with my girls, because I give. And the restaurant is very demanding. And some of the groups also, take a lot of interaction, but then just focusing on really what's important to me.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't have that self-awareness. So it's all in the growing process. And I write it in my goals. I write family time in my goals. And my girls kind of yell at me and they say, why do you have to write that down? I said, because if I'm not intentional with it, then unfortunately what happens is it gets less and less and less. And then who's not happy? We're all not.
I think that's an important facet to planning and articulating our intentions in the day, right? And for you to be able to showcase and share that with your girls while they're still young, right, is such a gift for them to realize that time isn't something that passes inconsequentially. If you start the habit of being intentional with your time while you're still in your youth, it definitely, I can see that transcending the trajectory of their lives, right? To be intentional in your time and your engagements and your relationships early, rather than that transactional way that we are encouraged as adults to just live our lives, right? That transactionality is a depleting factor versus the nurturing by being innate to your core is a fulfilling factor. And I think that's really beautiful and really powerful. And, one of the big callings on my heart is shifting the way that youth is receiving opportunity in the world, right? I think I heard a stat recently, 70% of adults have trauma, not just complication in their life, but actual trauma. And think of how many reframes and how much energy is leveraged for that trauma response.
Yeah.
Versus if we have the opportunity to fulfill youthful opportunity without requiring constant reframe and protection and the walls and the barriers. So for me, that's one of the highest callings on my heart right now. I come from 2 divorced parents at 3, mother remarrying, so a little bit of single mother lifestyle, remarried to someone who was abusive, going, out of that childhood abuse into a very powerful opportunity in a good foster care home, back living with my grandfather, living with my dad in true poverty. And, he never made more than $24,000 a year with his home business that he and his dad started, beautiful business. And I was raised by a community. And so there's so many hardships in my life that were so beautiful, right? Things that were that could be perceived as awful. Luckily, the darkest years were short. Right. And what I find interesting now as I'm digging deeper into my personal reframes is how strong and resilient I was because I was an adult at 6 years old versus that emotional fragility and openness that can come when you're raised with warmth. And I think that's why I'm so, just enamored by the purity of your heart and the way that you show up for people, because that is the path forward that we need to foster around the world. Having that opportunity to be loved and received and know that there's goodness, right? Like that's an opportunity for us to change the world.
Yeah.
And I think it's so beautiful when you get into that sincerity of this is what emotion can feel like. This is new to me, right? I was someone who never cried until I was 18. I learned emotion in my 20s and now I'm 34. So this is all very new to me, to have emotion and to be vulnerable. And in the last year, it's been about self-respect and self-worth. And so when you and I have our conversations, like I'm in the thick of the last year finding self-worth. And if I look back at 3 decades is normally leverage to build self-worth, and I'm doing it in the last year and a half, I'm in the thick of it. And it's a beautiful opportunity because I'm growing that with global community. I'm not doing it alone.
Yeah. It's huge.
but
Community
it's
is
not easy.
huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
And I can't say it enough. And I know that, you know, that I'm in the GST community, and of course I'm in 10X community. But just a couple things that you said really makes me think, because when we look at our past,
Mm.
I'll share with you too and be very vulnerable. I don't cry very often.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I perceived as a weakness.
Mm.
It's showing someone else,
Yeah.
right? That I mean, I've been hurt, right? So to cry for me means I'm having a feeling of deep, deep emotion,
Yeah.
which I don't show very often, because to me, I come from a single mom who my father was very abusive. He was a drunk, and we left early in life, but I still have those memories.
Mm.
And so my mom was always, always very strong. I write in my
Mhm.
gratitude journal every day that I'm grateful for the persistence that my mom and the perseverance that my mom showed me. I didn't know it then, but I
Mhm.
know it now. And so, like you were saying, just to take those little things from our past and what helped shape us, I don't look at it as something that was negative in my life anymore. I look at it as something that helped me grow and be who I am, so that I can be who I am for you. Share that with the world. I say, who am I becoming? Every instance in my life, I flip it and I say, life is happening for me and not to me.
Yeah.
So everything that we talked about before this show as well, you and I, it's happening for us, not to us. Because when we come out of it on the other side, we're going to remember all of these little things that help make us stronger. And then the other thing that I have found is it's applying. It's
Yeah.
the action that goes along with it. We could sit in it. We could sit in everything that's happened to us and say, poor me. And I don't know why this is happening. And we talked about our thought process, and where our thoughts go, that's where our energy flows. So if we can turn it around and we can take all of those things that happened to us and said, yeah, but look at me now. Look at
Mm.
me now, right? How far I've come, what I have put into myself and given to others.
Yeah.
That's the beauty. When we can see the beauty in what we've gone through versus sitting in maybe the darkness of what we've gone through,
Yeah.
is really difficult, but it's so powerful. I just think that it is truly, when you can look inside and take the self-awareness that you've gained and really turn that around, it's just a empowering. And I say this often. I say, you are your own superpower. When
Mm.
you learn you and you are aware and you can take pretty much anything that's thrown at you. It might not be instantaneous, it's not. When I say it's a superpower, it's the fact that you can actually see it and then do
Mm.
something with it versus just letting it happen to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a whole
Leverage.
process there, though. There's a whole process. It's not like it's just flip a switch and it's ready, but we have to be open to it.
Yes. Open to it and aware that work in
Mhm.
progress is better than
No
perfected
progress,
stagnation,
right?
right?
Mhm.
Perfected stagnation is something that, in corporate America, we all leverage and utilize so often. Is you're just like, I'm making the most of, right? Think about that phrase. I'm making the most of the situation. This is the resiliency button that so many people lean into and have at their disposal, right? Is being able to say, I'm making the most of the situation. I'm strong and resilient,
Mhm.
and therefore I'm doing what's right. And actually, the big shift for me is realizing that resiliency is not my superpower, and reframing to make every situation a good situation isn't necessarily the end all be all for the superpower. It's understanding that being a work in progress is better than being a stagnant perfectionist.
Mhm. Mm-hmm.
You can't just ebb and flow with everything. Taking a stance, having a point of view, sharing and showcasing
Mm-hmm.
your unique perspective is the greatest thing that I'm
Mm-hmm.
building right now in real time. And I'm doing it publicly because I think it's important for people to see that you can have everything mapped out and still take a completely different path because you
Definitely.
choose a different self-worth value.
Isn't there isn't there a quote? I think I don't know. I don't even know who said it, but isn't it if you have a plan, God laughs because there is no real plans, right? Because your plans don't matter. It's the plan that was sought out when you were born, right? Isn't that the way it goes?
Yeah.
I just think it's funny, but you said a really important thing. You said understanding. And I think that when we truly look inside and we understand ourselves, that's the self-awareness piece. But a lot of people don't take the time to understand. It's not just taking a situation, it's reflecting on the situation, and it's understanding, one, where it came from, and two, what can I do with that?
Yes.
Right? How can I use this not only for me, but for the betterment of what I'm doing? What is my purpose? What is my contribution?
Contribution is a powerful one to sit in the reframe and introspection
Mm-hmm.
on, because
Mm-hmm.
that was one of the first words that I started leveraging to step into a person who was different, right? It started with me relinquishing control was one of the first steps,
Mm-hmm.
right? Me relinquishing control was one of the first steps of me taking back ownership of my life. Started there. I
Mm-hmm.
relinquished control so that I actually have ownership, because that was me eliminating the authority that my patterns had created. Play with
Okay.
that one for a second, because that one's really important. Relinquishing control meant removing the authority of the patterns that I had been living through,
Mm-hmm.
right? Saying that there's choice and a sense of choosing allowable to me, open to me, accessible to me, each and every single interaction, every moment of every day. And
Mm-hmm.
the way that I negated my own self-worth and personal value to be in service of others was not me stepping into a place of contribution.
Right.
Diminishment of self is not your path to contribution. And
Mm-mm.
I think that's a major lesson that so many people have yet to receive, that you can have a strong sense of self and be of service to others. It's not a diminishing factor. It's not one or the other. You can fill your own cup. You can prioritize your own cup. One of the first lessons I had at 19 years old, I had a mentor. He was showcasing to me the opportunities available in corporate America instead of the blue collar life I had been raised into. And he said, one of his very first lessons to me, you need to learn to be selfish. He says, I witness in you that you give the entirety of your own identity to others. You need to learn to have a strong point of view. And it took me
Mm-hmm.
a decade to get through that, to
Mm-hmm.
actually understand it. I needed to hit my own personal rock bottoms time and time again to really realize what I stand for. What am I on this earth for? What am I here to contribute into others? And how open and willing am I to share it? I thought being strong and resilient and wearing a mask of perfection was my path forward. I truly did.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
So with everything that you just said, I have found that it's important to find the root of it. Do you know where it comes from?
That's something I'm in active action toward every single day, figuring out why this incredible accumulation of circumstance has been uniquely gifted into me. And with every opportunity and challenge, there's been love and support and community.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the great things that I know is that it's building me as a global citizen. That is one very strong piece of clarity that I sit in now,
Mm-hmm.
that my global contribution is why I've been gifted so many diversified challenges in my life, because it makes me accessible to understand not only poverty, not only hardship, not only, personal diminishment or diminishment from an outside source, third party,
Mm-hmm.
but also had the opportunity to build big business and to be a part of, major major business decision making. And so it's like there's just this dichotomy, this I used to say walking, talking juxtaposition about my life, because I'm a polar opposite in everything. And I love that. I've kind of sat down the middle of the hard and the easy, the good and the bad, the challenging and the effortless. And my whole life has been able to see on both sides. And for me, the knowingness is sitting that global impact and global citizenship is my path forward. And now it's about these courageous conversations have been about bridging that divide, bringing us together, showcasing the normalcy that no matter how much opportunity you might have or fulfillment you might possess, there's still somebody you can learn from, and there's, more importantly, still someone you can teach.
Always. And
no matter what place you're in, you can always teach somebody else one thing that you've learned.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too that you said in there, there's the middle, right? You're the polar, you can do the polar opposites of each. But I don't know, I still have this thing that says, where does it come from? I learned that if it's in my book, because I read something, goodness, I forgot the woman's name right now, but it's called Meant for More. Maya Hewitt. That is the book. It's called Meant for More. And in our brain, we have the memory, right? And a feeling of something that happened to us. And so if it's something that that scarred us or hurt us, and it's something in our subconscious, but we don't always know when it comes back up, a today event will bring us back to that moment when, you know what I mean, the scar was made. And so the reason why I asked you about where does that come from, have you ever really searched to see where that came from? Why you persevere all of the time, why sometimes you don't always have a voice. And I think the word you used was chameleon earlier, on why you do that. Have you ever searched? Have you ever really dug deep?
I'm definitely, this last year and a half is me actively digging deep in that.
Yeah.
And for me, what I've honed it down into is that self-worth, that diminishment of self in order to serve others. This is very top of mind. What I'm digging into this very month is, why do I completely relinquish my own personal value in order to be of service to others? I use that phrase very particularly, because it's one of those things that if I, and again, this is why the chameleon was a strong word for me. If I blend in and disappear and don't ruffle any feathers, no one will come after me. I won't hurt anybody. I won't diminish anybody. I won't be judged by anybody. Because being a tall, skinny blonde in corporate analytics, you have a target on your back like you wouldn't believe. And that is one of the most cutthroat industries you can be a part of. And
so there's a lot there.
There's a lot. There's so many layers of unpacking that I've been engaged in, because it's one of those things where I just want to be of service to others. But if I have a constant target on my back, I cannot be of service to others. So how could I ebb and flow? Again, ebb and flow, I use that phrase quite often. How could I ebb and flow around it? How could I be so agile? This is another word I use a lot. How could I be so agile that no matter what was thrown my way, I could land on my feet and show up with integrity? In corporate America, I was never cutthroat. I never stabbed anyone in the back. I never talked out of both sides of my mouth, right? I showed up with integrity every single day, no matter what was thrown at me. And that is not an easy thing to do. And it's not an easy thing to do, to hold your composure and your temper when you literally have women you're supposed to look up to cursing at each other, diminishing each other, backstabbing each other, right? So these are one of those things. And I think that's why I pivoted out of corporate in the last year, because I started to realize I cannot live a life where I'm constantly bouncing and being resilient to what's happening in my surroundings. I started to take ownership of my surroundings. Once you start taking ownership of your surroundings, it was a non-negotiable. I will not hold face for people while they're being awful and nasty. I won't do it.
Well,
And I
sit in
started
that power,
yeah.
because,
Oh
in
no,
the,
yeah, for sure.
right, in the conversations that we're having, it's, you want to be in the middle ground, but you just gave yourself the power and said, I will not do it. I absolutely will not do it. So let that sink in and feel that for a minute, because that's the vision that I see for you.
Yeah.
That's what I see. You owning your own power, not going to the right for one person and to the left for another person. That's a strong being that you are, stand tall and say, yes, this is non-negotiable for me. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people have a hard time drawing that line.
Yeah, non-negotiables is another one of the big topics of my life in the last year. What are non-negotiables?
Right.
How do you establish a community that supports them? How do
Mhm.
you ensure that, the most minute detail in your life is in support of that non-negotiable?
Well,
And I talk so much about like the nuance and the micro shifts,
mhm.
right? How do I pivot the micro shifts in my life to ensure that I'm accountable to those things? And one of the biggest things that the final kind of leeways for me is my energy. I told you before, I drink my B12 every day because I'm like, and my BCAA, because
Mhm.
I'm really trying to work at cellular energy, because that is one of the final components that I think is
Mhm.
the linchpin in me being able to really stand in that power. My
Mhm.
physical state must find a new path forward.
Will
That's another
find
thing.
one.
Yeah.
It will.
Yeah.
It will. But the consistency is huge. So just being consistent in that, like you said, the micro,
Yeah.
just keep being consistent in it. Just keep being consistent in it.
Micro shifts,
I
micro
see it.
targets,
Yes.
micro, nuanced moments, because it,
Yes.
it does matter. And,
Yes.
one of the biggest challenges for me post concussion is journaling. So you and so many of my dear friends, they always ask me, are you writing it down?
Right.
I have filled hundreds and hundreds of pages of handwritten notes and reflections in the last few months alone. I'm tangibly, tactically, and physically getting my point of view out of me. It starts for me with these courageous conversations, being able to ebb and flow with somebody else, being able to, back and forth with somebody else, because it pulls out those pieces that I'm
Mhm.
still not in full control of or access to, right?
Right.
My mental faculties are limited, and yet no one can tell but me, right? That's the big thing. That's the big thing that most people can't tell. These courageous conversations, it
Mhm.
flows like poetry.
Yeah.
And yet for me, I know the physical challenge and pressure that I sit in. And so
Hmm.
that's one of the active reframes that I'm working through now too. Nobody can tell, only I can tell that I'm as challenged as I still am. Right. And so
Mm.
that's one of those things where I just want to sit powerfully in that state of perceiving myself the way others perceive me.
Mhm.
This
Mhm.
is exactly what we touched on before we went live, is others see greatness that I am still not ready to fully possess. And that's a work in progress, right? Work in progress. I tell everybody every day, like, I'm documenting it because I want the video journey of the transformation. It's a lot of
Words,
garbage to clean up.
the words you speak are very, very powerful.
Yeah.
Affirmations, right? One of the biggest things that I learned is affirmations. What we speak is so powerful, so
Mm,
powerful. I don't know if you saw it, but I posted the video the first time I said I was going to write a book. I said,
mm,
I'm going to speak it. I'm actually going to put it out there, because once I do that, then somebody will hear it and I will keep repeating it. And as I keep repeating it, then it just rewires your brain. It just rewires your brain. And all of those things that you don't see in yourself, affirmations will help you with,
mhm.
right? And I tell people too, a lot of people look at me like I have three heads when I talk about my affirmations, but it's a whole chapter. It's a whole chapter in my book.
Mm,
And it is so powerful. It is
mm,
so powerful. Even if you don't believe it today,
mm,
Doug says, speak that for what you wish to become,
mm.
right? just keep speaking it, and you will rewire your brain, and it will become part of you. And it's not something that's so far-fetched. You know, you're not saying affirmations of I'm the most beautiful woman, you know, that ever walked the earth, that, you know, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is speak that for what you wish to become is one of my affirmations. I do that as a reminder that anything that comes out of my mouth is something that is giving me power to what I will become, who I am becoming. I'm not stuck in what happened to me before. I speak as though I am already where I'm going. So what I'm becoming.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that is really, really powerful. I love every level of depth that we've had in this conversation today. I think you and I both have a lot of introspective moments that have come organically just from this courageous conversation, and so many
good.
that we have together. I think it's really powerful when you can get into authentic, raw conversation with somebody else who's one step ahead of you in one area and you're one step ahead of them in another. And it just that beautiful transference of energy and lessons. It's just one of the greatest gifts we have, and not something everybody has access to.
It's true. Absolutely.
Which is really important, when we normalize these kind of interactions, because emotion, regardless of age, gender, or occupation, are becoming more top of mind than they ever have before. Think of generations past where you never showed vulnerability. That was a word that was almost unspoken or unknown. Right. And now we're normalizing it to such an incredibly powerful degree, because we do afford ourselves that opportunity to shift the generational experience, that the next generation can have a little softer go at it. We're an evolving human species. That's part of
so
that
cool.
trajectory.
So cool.
Yeah.
When you're in that and you really feel it, it's really powerful. It's very, very powerful.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed all of our conversations.
Very excited to continually dig deep and showcase these opportunities with our communities. And I think what's really beautiful and powerful about it is we're both nurturing each other as we elevate and stretch towards these gigantic global impact movements that we're both creating, which makes me really excited, because we can be completely authentic. Hi, today is a bad day, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. It's okay. It's part of the journey, and it's part of going after those big global goals. Is you're a human, and that's part of the human experience.
That's right.
Yeah.
But it's how we react. It's how we react. And those are the tips and tricks and tools that we've learned along the way, right?
Yeah.
So
you saw me many times throughout this conversation. I just breathe deep, and I own the energy and the transference and the shift, because I think that really matters, to just hold space for these transformations, because it's not easy. And there's so many things that come up along the way. But for everybody tuning in, I hope you got something powerful out of this interaction today, and that you will continue to tune in as Sin and I go deep in these courageous conversations. I just feel so blessed that we have this forum, this platform, this engagement to share ourselves so openly with all of you. So
thank you so much for the opportunity. I always love having the conversations with you. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks.